My name is Elaine Mercer. I was 54 years old when my wedding video caught the one thing the cameraman never meant to film. I owned Mercer's Bakery, a small brick storefront with blue awnings on the corner of Clement Street. 42 years of recipes pressed into index cards in a tin box above the register, and one checking account that nobody had ever touched but me. Russell knew that before he married me. His daughter Paige knew it too. The morning after our wedding, they accused me of stealing our own gift. Envelopes and hiding cash in my purse like some desperate woman who could not be trusted with family money. They said the only decent way to fix the embarrassment was to open a joint account immediately and add Russell to my bakery banking. I almost believed the shame before I watched the reception video alone in my kitchen at 11:30 at night. A cup of tea was going cold on the counter beside me. The cameraman had been filming my aunt dancing, but in the corner of the frame, for 3 seconds, Paige lifted the card box, looked toward her father, and changed the rest of my life with her hand. I want to be precise about what that bakery meant before I tell you what happened inside it. And around it, and because of it, because I think the story does not make full sense unless you understand what was actually at stake. Mercer's Bakery is not a cute hobby. I ran between errands. It is my mortgage. It is the heat in my house in January, and the insurance on my car, and 3 people's paychecks. Every single Friday, without exception. It was my father's idea. Originally, not the storefront, but the premise of it. The idea that a woman who could bake the way I could bake should be doing it for money and not only for the people around her who had learned to expect it for free. He helped me sign the first lease when I was 29 years old, with money he had saved from 22 years of driving a city bus. He stood inside the empty storefront that first afternoon with his hands in his pockets. He looked at the bare walls and said, "Put blue awnings up. Blue makes people feel like they have time to stay." He was right. People stayed. They came back. They brought their kids and then their grandkids and ordered the same things their mothers had ordered. And I learned every regular customer's name and what they took in their coffee and whether they wanted the muffin warmed. That is not a small thing. That is a business built on 42 years of specific attention, and it was mine. And the account that funded it had never once been wrong. My father helped me carry the commercial mixer through the back door the year he retired. That was the last business decision we made together. The cancer came 2 winters later, faster than anyone had said it would. I spent those winters driving to the hospital before the bakery opened and driving back after it closed. And the bakery kept going because that is what you build something properly for, so that it holds when you need it to hold. I kept the blue awnings. I still do. Russell entered my life 2.5 years before the wedding, after my sister introduced us at a fundraiser dinner for the Children's Hospital downtown. He was warm in the specific way of someone who has done reading about the person they are about to meet. He asked about the bakery by name. He asked which recipes were mine and which had been handed down. He asked whether the blue awnings were original. I told him about my father, and he listened the whole way through without checking his phone once. I thought that was character. I understand now that it was research. He came to the bakery before opening some mornings and sat at the counter with coffee while I prepped, and he never once asked to see the books. At the time, I read that as respect. I understand now that there are 2 kinds of people who do not ask to see the books in the early months of a relationship: people who genuinely do not care, and people who know the ask would end the relationship before they have built enough trust to make it cost something. Russell was the second kind. He was patient in the way of someone with a specific destination in mind who does not want to arrive before the door is unlocked. We had one direct conversation about the bakery account 6 months before the wedding. It was a Sunday morning, his coffee going cold on the kitchen table, sunlight coming through the window at the angle it does in early March when it is still more promise than warmth. I told him plainly that the bakery account was separate, had always been separate, and would stay that way after the wedding. I told him I was happy to open a joint household account for shared expenses, and I would contribute to it fairly. He said he respected that completely. He said the word respected the way you say a word you have practiced using in the right context. His daughter Paige was in the armchair by the window, eating a peach, and she did not say anything at all. She looked at the wall above my head, in the particular way people look at something when they are deciding it is temporary. I noticed that. I filed it and moved on, the way I had learned to file small wrong things without making them into accusations before I had evidence for the accusation. We married on a Saturday in September. Hotel ballroom, 63 people. White flowers. I had arranged with my niece the Friday before. The ceremony was simple, and the food was good, and the band played the songs I had asked for. The card box was white with a blue ribbon, the same shade as the bakery awnings, and I placed it myself on the table beside the cake under the low floral arch where it was, visible from the main floor and far enough from the bar that nobody would knock it, reaching for a drink. The videographer's name was Derek. He was 26, recommended by my florist, conscientious in the way of someone who treats every job like it matters regardless of the size. He moved through the whole reception with a camera that barely stopped rolling. I liked that about him. I liked that he filmed the edges of things, the tables during toasts, the kitchen door swinging open, the card box sitting where I had put it beside the cake with the ribbon catching alight. I did not watch the video that night. I was tired in the specific way of a person who has just organized an event for 63 people while also being the person getting married. And I went to bed at 11 with the knowledge that Derek would send the link in the following days. That was the only thing I did that turned out to be accidental luck, though I did not know it yet. The morning after what should have been a honeymoon night, Paige appeared at the hotel restaurant breakfast. She was not invited, or she was very invited. I cannot say for certain now which it was. She sat down across from me in the booth while Russell was still settling into the seat beside her, and she ordered coffee she did not touch. She told me she had seen me messing with the gift box at the reception. She used that phrase exactly, messing with, the way you say a phrase you have chosen carefully enough that it sounds like it came to you naturally. Russell looked at the table, then at me, then at the table again. Then he arranged his face into the expression of a man who is pretending to be caught between two people he loves equally. That is an expression I have seen on the faces of men who have already made their decision and are performing the uncertainty for the audience. He said 12 envelopes were missing from the card box. He said that the decent thing, the quiet thing, the thing that would let the family move forward without any of this becoming ugly, was for me to transfer enough from the bakery account to cover the missing total. He said the phrase, "let the family move forward," in the specific cadence of someone who has practiced it. His family, 2 cousins and his brother seated at the next table over, close enough to have been placed there on purpose, watched me the way you watch something when you already know how the scene ends. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm under the table. I did not say anything. Then Paige opened her bag. She set 6 envelopes on the table between us. She said she had found them tucked inside my purse that morning, under my lipstick bag. when she came by to bring it down from the room. My purse had sat on a chair near the sweetheart table all night while I danced. I had not gone near the gift table. But the envelopes were there, and they had my purse as the source. 6 of Russell's family members were looking at me with the settled patience of people who have already decided what kind of woman I am. For about 4 minutes, I sat in that booth feeling something I had not felt since my first husband mocked the bakery in front of his friends at a company dinner while I sat next to him and smiled. I felt like the problem. I felt the specific weight of being a capable woman in a room full of people who have decided that capability is the same as calculation. Then I remembered the video. I paid for my own coffee. I picked up my purse. I told Russell I would be in touch, and I stood up. He said it was concerning that I was leaving without resolving the situation. I said I agreed it was concerning and kept walking through the restaurant to the lobby and out, to the parking lot. The morning air was cooler than I expected, and I stood beside my car for a moment with my keys in my hand, breathing. Then I drove to the bakery. Derek had sent the download link 2 days earlier with a short email that said, "The edited version was attached, and the raw files were available for personal archiving if I wanted them." I had not opened it yet. I opened it that night in the bakery kitchen, sitting on a stool at the prep counter with the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing above me, the way they always buzz after 10 at night. The street outside had gone quiet. The refrigerator compressor cycled down, and the building made its small sounds. I had a cup of tea. I had not eaten dinner. I watched the ceremony first, not for evidence, just because it was my wedding and I had not seen it yet, and some part of me wanted to look at the parts that had still been true before the breakfast the next morning. The light in the ceremony room had been good. My niece had done a beautiful job with the flowers. I looked better than I thought I had. Then I moved to the reception. The card box was not beside the cake. I rewound to the first wide shot of the reception room, the one taken about 20 minutes into the cocktail hour when the tables were still being settled and the band was doing sound check near the back wall. The card box was where I had put it. Blue ribbon, white box, square on the table under the floral arch. I watched the footage forward. By the time the first course plates were being cleared, the box was gone from that spot. I rewound again. I watched the area around the cake table more carefully. The box moved off-screen between 2 wide shots, during a period when Derek's camera had turned to follow a group of Russell's relatives doing something near the bar. When the camera came back to the cake side of the room, the box was simply not there anymore. I sat with that for a moment. It was not a dramatic moment. It was the quiet, specific unease of noticing something is in the wrong place. The feeling of opening a filing cabinet and finding a folder 2 slots from where you left it. Not alarming on its own, just wrong. In the small, precise way of something that has been moved by someone who did not think you would check. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm and kept watching. In the background of a wide shot from the later reception, the band playing something with a good beat and my aunt doing something enthusiastic with her arms. I could see the coat-room doorway along the left wall. The white card box was there, half hidden behind one of the tall chairs the hotel had lined against the wall for guests who needed to sit away from the main floor. The blue ribbon was still visible. The box had been moved from a public table in full sight of the main floor to a corridor, doorway, where it could be accessed without being seen from most of the room. I pulled up Derek's email and found the note about the raw files. I downloaded the full unedited reception file. It was long, over 3 hours, including setup and breakdown footage that had not made the edited cut. The file had the original timestamp embedded. I opened it and went to 8:30 in the evening. I found the timestamp at 8:42. The shot was aimed at the dance floor, my aunt's enthusiastic dancing pulling the frame left, but in the lower left corner, the card table edge was visible, and Paige was there. Silver dress, her back mostly to the camera. The white card box was open in front of her on the chair she had moved it to, not on the table, on the chair, at a height and angle that would have been easy to access quickly. She removed a stack of envelopes. She did not count them. She moved quickly with the efficiency of someone who has thought through the motion in advance. Then she turned her head to the right side of the frame. Russell was standing near the sweetheart table, close to the chair where I had left my purse when I went to the dance floor an hour earlier. I could not see his face from the angle. I could see his hand move to touch Paige's elbow. The brief coordinating contact of two people executing something they have already agreed on. Paige bent toward the chair. The angle of the raw footage was not perfect. Her body blocked most of the downward motion. I almost stopped there because almost is not proof, and I have spent enough of my life knowing the difference between a thing I believe and a thing I can show. But the hotel had a decorative mirror behind the bar, long, mounted at a slight angle to make the back bar look larger, the way hotel designers do. The mirror was not centered in the frame. It was in the upper left corner of the shot, catching the reflection of the sweetheart table area. It caught Paige's hand. Just the hand. Just the motion of it going down into the open purse on the chair. I sat on that stool in the empty bakery kitchen for a long time after I paused the video. I want to tell you what I felt, but I want to be careful to tell you the truth of it rather than the version that sounds more like a story. What I felt was not triumph. What I felt was the particular exhaustion of having been right about something you wished you had been wrong about. I had wanted to be wrong about Russell. I had wanted the breakfast to be a misunderstanding, a confusion about where things had been placed and who had touched what. The 3 seconds on the screen in front of me meant it had never been a misunderstanding. It had been a plan. And the plan had been running the whole time I was on the dance floor feeling like I was. Finally, for once, at a party that was simply good. I wanted to send Paige a screenshot with one sentence underneath it. I had it typed before I understood what I was doing. I looked at the message on my screen for a few seconds. Then I deleted it. Not because I was being generous, because a warning gives them a runway. A warning gives Paige time to call Russell, and Russell time to build a counter story. By morning, there would be a version of events where I had sent threatening messages to my new stepdaughter within 48 hours of the wedding, which would become the story instead of the video. Anger would hand them something to use. The proof would hand me a room. I closed the message window, labeled the raw file, wedding card box, raw proof, and sat in the bakery until midnight making decisions about what to do next. The first call was to Derek. I called him the following morning before the bakery opened. I did not explain everything. I told him I was working on a personal matter involving the reception footage and asked if he could send me the raw camera file with the original metadata intact. I asked for the unprocessed file that comes directly off the card before compression or color work. He said he could send it by afternoon. He asked if everything was all right with the wedding. I told him the ceremony had been beautiful, which was true. The second thing I did was drive to the hotel. I asked at the front desk for the head of security and was directed to a man named Cal, mid to late 50s. Patient, in the unhurried way of someone who has spent a career handling situations that are exactly as complicated as they look. I told him I was a guest from the Saturday wedding event and that some items had gone missing. from the reception, and that I was trying to establish a timeline before filing anything formal. I asked whether the hallway cameras near the courtroom corridor would have footage from Saturday evening. Cal looked up the event in his log, pulled the relevant camera segment, and showed me the timestamp on his screen without me asking twice. The hallway camera outside the courtroom corridor showed Paige Mercer, identifiable from the hotel guest registry, moving the white card box from the banquet floor into the corridor at 8:39 in the evening. Russell Mercer was visible in the frame, standing at the corridor entrance while she moved the box. Neither of them had spoken to any hotel staff about relocating the item. There was no authorization in the hotel log for the movement. Cal asked if I would like a written incident note confirming what the camera had recorded. I said yes. He said he would have it to me by email that afternoon. He did not ask why I needed it in writing. I think he had a sense. I thanked him and went back to my car in the hotel parking garage and sat for about 6 minutes, not thinking about anything in particular, just sitting. The concrete of the parking level was that specific gray that looks the same at 10 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, and the lighting was the flat fluorescent kind that does not make time feel like it is moving. I sat in it for 6 minutes, and then I started the car and drove back to the bakery. In my office, I printed still frames from the raw file. I chose 3, one that showed Paige at the card box, one that showed Russell's hand on her elbow, and one that was a cropped enlargement of the mirror reflection showing her hand at the purse. I saved the full raw file to 2 separate drives and locked one in a bakery safe behind the employee time records. I wrote a timeline on paper, longhand, in the same notebook I use for ingredient orders. Card box moved at 8:39, according to hotel camera. Envelopes removed at 8:42, according to wedding camera. Elaine's dance floor timestamp from 8:30 through 9:15, according to raw file. No overlap. No ambiguity. I clipped the hotel incident note behind the printed frames when it arrived that afternoon. Then I called my bank. Russell had scheduled a joint account consultation for Thursday morning. He had called the branch himself. I learned from Mrs. Calloway, the branch manager, who called me Wednesday to confirm the appointment. She mentioned he had used the phrase consolidating after the wedding, which told me the framing he intended to walk in with. I told Mrs. Calloway I needed to reschedule for Friday and asked if she would be able to have a second staff member present for the consultation. I said I preferred a witnessed financial conversation given the circumstances. She did not ask for detail. Her tone had the measured neutrality of someone who had managed enough complicated post-marriage banking to know when a second set of eyes was a reasonable request. I also called the hotel and asked Cal to formalize the incident note as an official written record rather than an informal log entry. He said he would file it and send me a signed copy. It arrived Thursday morning. Paige Mercer, identified by hotel guest registration records, was documented moving the event gift box without authorization at 8:39 in the evening. Russell Mercer present. No hotel staff contact made regarding the relocation. I printed it on the copy paper in the office, not the good paper, the copy paper, because I was printing 3 copies of everything, and I did not need it to be precious. I needed it to be legible and reproducible and in a folder that closed with a clasp. I went home Thursday night and slept better than I had since the wedding. I arrived at the bank 12 minutes before the Friday appointment. The conference room was small, the kind of room that gets used for uncomfortable things, loan reviews, estate consultations, the particular kind of financial conversation that needs frosted glass walls and a door that closes. There was a square table, 6 chairs, and a coffee machine on the credenza along the wall that hummed at a constant low pitch, regardless of whether anyone was using it. I had been in this room twice before for bakery business. It felt like a room where paperwork went to become final. I set my laptop at my seat and angled it toward the center of the table. I placed the printed still frames face down in front of Mrs. Calloway's chair and set the hotel incident note underneath them. I put the folder with the timeline inside my bag. Then I sat with my coffee and waited. The coffee machine hummed. A truck went by on the street outside, audible through the glass for 3 seconds and then gone. Russell arrived 7 minutes after I did. He was wearing the navy blazer I had bought him for the rehearsal dinner. He had not worn it since that night. He came in with the particular ease of a man who believes the room is already arranged in his favor. Shoulders relaxed, one hand in his pocket, the light expression of someone doing an errand that will resolve simply. He pulled out the chair across from me and moved to sit. Then the door opened again and Paige came in behind him. She was not on the appointment. She said she was there because her father got overwhelmed with paperwork, which she delivered with a brief smile in Mrs. Calloway's direction, as though this were a relatable and charming explanation. She sat to Russell's right, placed her bag on the table, and arranged herself in the chair with the settled posture of someone who belongs in a room and wants the room to know it. She looked at me once, just a glance, quick and assessing, and then at the closed laptop on the table, and then at Mrs. Calloway coming in with a second bank officer behind her. A younger man whose name I did not catch took the chair in the corner and opened a notepad. Mrs. Calloway sat down, placed her pen beside her notepad, and said she understood everyone was here to discuss joint banking options following a recent marriage. She said it with the specific professionalism of someone who intends to be courteous, until courtesy is no longer the right tool. Russell said yes, that was right. They were looking to consolidate and get everything under one roof. He glanced at me when he said everything. Paige folded her hands on the table. She looked at the face-down papers in front of Mrs. Calloway but did not ask about them. I did not say anything. I turned the laptop toward the center of the table and pressed play. I had muted the audio because the coffee machine had turned out to be louder than I estimated, and I did not want the ambient sound of the reception competing with what I needed the room to see. The silence turned out to be the right choice. There is something about watching footage without sound that makes you look at it harder. You cannot half listen. You have to watch. The 3 seconds played. Paige's silver dress, her back to the camera, the deliberate motion toward the card box, Russell's hand on her elbow, the tilt of her body toward the sweetheart table chair, and the mirror behind the bar catching what the camera angle alone could not quite catch. The hand, her hand, going down into the open purse with the silver clasp that I had bought in 2019 and had not replaced because it still worked fine. Paige stopped breathing through her mouth. It was a small thing, the kind of thing you would not notice if you were not looking at a person's face specifically. Her lips pressed together. The color behind her cheekbones shifted in the complicated way that happens when a body receives news it was hoping not to receive. She looked at the screen, and then at the table, and then at some point in the middle distance that was neither the screen nor the table. Russell said, "That does not show what you think it shows." His voice thinned on the word think. Not dramatically, not in the way of a man falling apart, in the way of a word that leaves your mouth at slightly less pressure than the one before it, because the confidence that was generating the pressure has encountered an obstacle. I let the clip loop once more. Then I placed the hotel incident note on the table beside the laptop. Card box moved at 8:39, I said. Envelopes on camera at 8:42. The timestamp metadata from the raw file is attached. Derek, the videographer, can verify the source file is unedited. The hotel security note below it documents the corridor camera footage and confirms who moved, the box, and when. I placed the first still frame beside the note. Paige said that could be any purse. Her voice was higher than I had ever heard it. Not loud, just higher. The way a voice goes when the person speaking has run the sentence in their head and heard it, fail even as they were saying it. I placed the second still frame on the table. It was the cropped enlargement of the mirror reflection. The silver clasp on the purse was clear in the frame, not sharp enough to be a catalog photo, but specific enough to be what it was. I said, "That is my clasp." Mrs. Calloway picked up the hotel incident note and read it. She set it down without looking at Paige. She picked up the first still frame and looked at it for a moment. She set it beside the note, aligned them, and put her pen down. Russell said Paige had only been trying to help. He said things got confused at receptions. He said, Elaine. And he used my name with a weight he had never put on it before. Maybe was misreading something that had been innocent. It was a weight that was trying to sound like gentleness, but was actually the weight of a man, reaching for a frame he could still step into. I said, "You did not catch me stealing. You filmed yourselves framing me." The coffee machine hummed. A pen rolled a short distance across the table from Mrs. Calloway's notepad and stopped. Against the edge of the hotel letter, the younger officer in the corner did not write anything. He held his pen above the notepad and waited. Russell's mouth opened and then did not produce anything for a moment, and in that moment he looked at Paige. It was the first honest thing he had done since he walked into the room. An involuntary look at the person who was actually responsible for the situation he was now inside. Paige was looking at the still frame under Mrs. Calloway's hand. She was not looking at Russell. She was looking at the clasp. Mrs. Calloway asked Russell one question. She asked him why, if his wife had allegedly stolen from the wedding gift box, he had called the bank branch 2 days later to schedule an appointment to access her business operating account, rather than contacting the hotel security office or filing a police report. Russell said it had been a family matter. He said they had wanted to handle it internally. Mrs. Calloway said she understood and wrote something on her notepad that she kept facing toward herself. Then she said she would step out briefly to consult with a colleague before they continued. The door opened before she finished standing. Russell's sister Karen had arrived in the lobby and been brought back by the junior banker at the front. Who had assumed she was part of the appointment? She walked into the conference room carrying a folder. I learned later that the folder contained a written family statement Russell had drafted, a document claiming I had verbally acknowledged taking the envelopes at the hotel breakfast. He had apparently asked 3 family members to sign it. Karen had signed it the day before without reading the wedding footage situation in full, because Russell had told her only his version. She walked into the room carrying that folder. She saw the laptop screen frozen on the still frame. She saw Paige's silver dress on the image. She saw Mrs. Calloway's expression, which was the expression of a person who has already formed a view and is being courteous about, not announcing it. She stopped walking. She stood in the open doorway with the folder in her hand and looked at Russell. She said, "Russell, tell me you did not make me accuse her." He said something about how it was complicated, how Paige had been trying to protect the family, how things had moved quickly. Karen set her folder on the table, not open. She put it down flat and she moved her hand away from it. Then she pushed the chair that was in front of her away from the table. The leg caught the tile floor and made a long, flat scraping sound that went all the way to the wall and came back. Then she walked out of the conference room without closing the door. The junior banker in the hallway looked at the open door. He looked at nobody in particular and stepped aside. Paige said her father had been under a lot of stress since the wedding. Mrs. Calloway came back with her colleague 8 minutes later. She informed Russell that based on the documentation I had provided and the financial pattern, the bank was obligated to note in cases of disputed business account access, the joint account application was being declined. She said my bakery operating account would remain in my name only, and that the original account, access scheduling, would be flagged as an attempted business account acquisition under disputed circumstances. She said the documentation I had brought would be retained in the branch file, with my permission. I said yes. Russell tried twice more. He said I was being vindictive for not giving the marriage a chance to recover. He said that Paige had made a poor decision under pressure, but that he had not fully known the extent of what she had done until this morning. That was the most revealing sentence he had spoken since sitting down, because it confirmed he had known something. It also confirmed that whatever he had known, he had decided to proceed anyway. He said the marriage could still be repaired if I was willing to be reasonable. Mrs. Calloway said she did not think the bank was the right venue for that conversation and thanked everyone for coming in. I stayed seated while Russell and Paige gathered their things. Paige did not take the still frame from the table. She left it where Mrs. Calloway had set it, under the hotel letter, and picked up her bag. She walked out without making eye contact with anyone. Russell put on the navy blazer slowly and stood for a moment looking at the table as if something he had left on it might still be retrievable. Then he looked at me once, a long look that was trying to be something, wounded or appealing, or asking, and I looked at the laptop screen and waited for him to leave. The door closed. Mrs. Calloway said she was sorry this had happened. She said it in the professional register, not the personal one, which was the right call. I told her I was grateful she had been willing to have a witness in the room. She said it was standard practice for complex consultations. Neither of us made more of it than that. That afternoon, I drove to the police station. I brought the raw video file on a drive with Derek's name and contact information on the label. I brought the hotel incident note on hotel letterhead, signed by Cal and dated. I brought the printed still frames, 3 of them, in a labeled folder. And I brought the 6 envelopes Paige had placed on the breakfast table at the hotel. I had taken them when I stood up and left that morning and had kept them sealed in a paper bag in the bakery safe ever since. I had not opened them. I did not know if they were empty or still held cards. I did not want to know until it was in front of someone whose job it was to document what was inside. The officer at intake asked me to describe the situation twice. I described it the same way both times, in the same order, with the same level of detail. Because the truth only has one version, and I had been living inside it for 4 days. He looked at the documentation for a while. He said it was unusually complete for this type of case. I did not explain why. He filed the report, gave me a case number on a receipt-sized slip of paper, and told me a detective would be in touch if they needed the original drive. I drove back to the bakery. I put the case number in the tin box above the register with the index cards. Then I opened the bakery and finished the afternoon. The 2 weeks that followed were not a movie ending. I want to say that clearly because I think people hear these stories and wait for the moment where everything resolves into something clean. Mostly, what resolution looks like in real life is quieter and slower and more ordinary than that. Russell sent 4 messages over the first 2 weeks. The first was about embarrassment, his. He said the bank meeting had been humiliating, and he hoped I understood how much damage I had caused to his reputation. The second was about forgiveness, the kind of message where the writer describes the peace that could be achieved if the reader would simply choose to move toward it, which is a way of discussing forgiveness that never includes the word sorry. The third was the longest. It was about Paige. It said she was 32 years old and had panicked, that she had convinced herself she was helping him secure his future, that she had not thought through the consequences for anyone else. It described her in the vocabulary of a father explaining a child rather than an adult, explaining a co-conspirator, which told me something about how he had organized the story inside his own head. The fourth message was 2 sentences. He said he hoped I would be open to talking when I was ready. Then he said the door was open on his end. I did not answer any of them. Not as punishment, not to make him wait, because there was nothing to negotiate. The footage had a timestamp. The timestamp had been verified by the person who shot it and the hotel where the camera was mounted. There was no version of a conversation that made those facts different. I had spent enough of my adult life in the position of being asked to soften a truth so that the person who had produced the situation could feel better about being inside it. That position had a shape I recognized, and I was no longer willing to stand in it. My brother called in the second week. He said he had spoken with Russell's family and they felt I was being difficult. He used that word, difficult, in the familiar tone of a man who has used that word to describe me before. In other contexts, in other years, when I changed the safe code after he borrowed from the register and called it an overreaction. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm and told him I would forward him the video timestamp and the hotel documentation if he wanted to form his own view of the situation, and that I would not be discussing it further until he had looked at what I was sending. He did not call back that week. I left the door open. I always leave the door open. I have learned that the door being open is not the same as the terms being negotiable. Maya, who has worked my front counter for 6 years, left flowers on my office desk one morning without a note. Grocery store flowers, the kind that come wrapped in plastic with a rubber band and a small paper sleeve, yellow and white. She did not say anything about them. I did not say anything about them either. I left them on the desk until the water went cloudy. Then I poured it out and put the vase back under the sink and went on. The staff at the bakery kept things moving in the way that people who have worked together long, enough sometimes do, without discussion, without ceremony, just a slight closing of ranks around the person who is managing something hard, while also managing all the regular things. I noticed it. I was grateful for it in the wordless way of a person who is too tired for the version of gratitude that requires sentences. In my office, there is a cabinet above the prep station where I keep the supply invoices and the week's timesheets and the tin box with the index cards. It closes with a magnetic latch that makes a small sound when it opens. A brief, soft click. I have heard tens of thousands of times. I taped one still frame to the inside of that door. The mirror reflection frame, the clearest one, showing Paige's hand at the purse clasp. I did not put it where customers could see it. I did not put it on the wall or the register or the window. I put it where only I could see it when I was in my own office, doing my own work, running the business that was still entirely mine. Not as anger. The anger had already done its work and been replaced by something quieter and more permanent. I put it there as a reminder of what staying accurate costs when the people around you have been built around your not checking. My father said something to me once. The winter before he got sick, when the bakery was going through a hard quarter and I was close to taking a loan, I did not. need from a person I should not have trusted. He said, "Some people mistake your patience for permission." He said it mildly, the way he said most things, like an observation and not a lecture. I had carried it wrong for years, had read it as a warning about being more guarded. I understand now that he meant the opposite. He meant stay patient, stay accurate, and let the proof do what the anger cannot. 3 seconds of footage did what I had been too tired and too ashamed to do for 4 days, not because proof is magic. Because proof, in the right room, with the right people watching, removes the one thing a lie needs in order to survive: the possibility of doubt. The new business account card arrived 10 days after the bank meeting. Standard mail, no ceremony, a small card in a plain envelope with the bank's return address in the corner. Just my name on the front. Elaine Mercer. No joint holder. No second name on the line below. I stood at the prep counter before sunrise holding it. The first bread was in the oven. The street outside was the gray-blue color it gets in the hour before the light decides what it is going to be. The kitchen smelled the way it has always smelled at that hour: yeast and warmth, and the faint sweetness of the dough that had been proofing since 4 in the morning. I had been coming into this kitchen at this hour for 26 years. My father had stood in this kitchen at this hour on more mornings than I can count, drinking coffee he had made on the small machine in the corner, watching me work, not saying much. I picked up the old card from the counter where I had left it. I took the bread scissors from the hook beside the prep station and cut the card in half. I put both halves in the trash under the register. Not the office trash. The register trash. So they would go out with the day's waste before the bakery opened. Then I put the new card in the slot under the till where I have kept every business account card I have ever owned, going back to the first one issued the year I signed the lease. That first card was so worn by the time I replaced it that the numbers had rubbed smooth and the strip on the back had to be entered manually at every terminal. The new card was crisp. The numbers were sharp. My name was clear. I stood behind the counter in the empty bakery with the ovens running and the bread rising and the blue awnings outside catching the first gray light of the morning. And I did not feel victorious or vindicated or healed. I felt like myself. Specifically, exactly, recognizably myself. A woman who had been building something for a long time and had refused to let someone else's plan become more important than what she had built. That is not revenge. Revenge has a shape I do not trust, a narrative pull toward cruelty that I have never found clean. What happened in a bank conference room with frosted glass walls was not revenge. It was proof meeting denial in a room neither of them could leave early, and proof winning because it was the one that had a timestamp. The marriage had already been built to use me. The 3 seconds on that video did not break it. They only documented what it had already been. I had walked into that wedding believing in a person I had assembled from carefully selected evidence, and the video showed me the evidence I had not been shown. That is a painful thing to be accurate about. It is also the only way to be done with it. The bakery opens at 6. The blue awnings are still my father's shade. Maya is at the counter by 5:45. The bread comes out of the oven at 5:50, and the smell of it goes into the street before the door opens. People smell it from the sidewalk and come in because of it, the way they always have, the way they have always come back. The card is in the register. The still frame is in the cabinet. 3 seconds were enough. If someone framed you on your own wedding day, would you expose the video in private? or make them watch it in front of every person they lied to.